Hello, guys, and welcome to the latest MSC Performance Podcast. This is episode number 15. Really hope you're enjoying all our content so far. What a week it's been. Dates have been announced for reopening of the gyms on April the 12th, so we're all absolutely buzzing for that, and we hope you are too. The sun's shining, temperatures getting a bit warmer. What a time to be alive. So in today's episode, as you can see, we've got a pretty much a full house. So hello to all the guys.
Hello.
So today we've got a Q&A episode. So the other day we put up on Instagram a Q&A, an opportunity for members to chip in with some questions that they wanted answered. So we've picked six good questions, and we're going to crack on with them. So without further ado, guys, I will get started with the first question. So the first question is through our Instagram from VJM Tattoo, who says, how do you all find the time to train and live a healthy lifestyle when you are constantly training others? I think this is a really interesting question, because most people think we just train ourselves all day. It's nice that somebody's actually realized that we do a bit of work. So I'm going to direct this one to Sonia, actually. So Sonia works obviously full-time at MSC and is juggling a master's in strength conditioning at the same time. So yeah, fire away, Sonia. How do you deal with all of that going on?
Yeah, I actually really like this question. I think we spoke about it yesterday, that we often get this from people like, well, it's easy for you because you work in a gym. So yeah, I think that this is like misunderstood, that just because you work in a gym, it doesn't make you any other to anybody else. Like perhaps you have a bit more of like a big opportunity to train because you're in the gym. Because I can compare to times when I worked outside the gym, so I know that it's not always easy to find that hour, or to find that motivation perhaps and energy to come in. But I think if you have the determination and you know what you're training for, it's just something so natural to me to train. Like I like to compare it to like brushing your teeth. Like it's just something what's gonna be done. So and that's when I train other people, for me it doesn't seem like something I have to do. Like it's something I just do. It's the lifestyle, and I think that's why we also chosen to be coaches, because it's just something we do and we want to lead people towards it. So I think if any of us wouldn't train, we wouldn't really be doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, like you've got, I always used to moan about, not enough hours in the day, and I still do occasionally, but it's that's never going to change the amount of time you've got in a day, is it? So it's about prioritizing certain things in life. And obviously we all, are very sort of career minded, I'd say, perhaps compared to the average person.
Like we all know that, sometimes you have full day of coaching and you're at work and then you train in the evening. Like you would know the best that like he trains late night sometimes, but it's just because, well, you want to train, so you'll find that time in the evening or in the morning. Sometimes I train early in the morning, like prior I open. So it's just about the priorities, I would say. Yeah. So it doesn't seem something like you've got to do it. Or like I'm pushing myself into it, but like it's there. It's the part of the day. It's natural.
I think.
Sorry, go on, Ben.
I was going to say, going off from your last week, your chat with Jazz, talking about how it's not like you're missing out on an hour or 2 hours. It's like you've chosen that you're going to spend the next hour training. It's not like you feel like, I'm going to be missing out on an hour of whatever, socializing or watching TV. You've made that conscious decision. Like, I know why I'm training. I know the long-term goal from this. So that's why you just crack on and do it.
It's a passion. It's a part of your life. And,
yeah. And like Sonia said, it's like brushing your teeth, like do the old shark bite method. Just get it done.
Yeah.
Also, as well, I'll butt in here. I think something that Sonia said about actually enjoying it and how the reason why you kind of chose to be a coach is it doesn't feel like work. I think for a lot of people, if you can find a kind of training, you can find a routine that you actually actively enjoy. It's a lot easier to make time in the day. Like I say, I think if people in a normal day, not necessarily just in the COVID era, but in a normal day, if you've got work, you've got to fit training in, and then you've kind of got to have some time for leisure as well and to switch off. You can get to the point where you have like a really good social circle or community around the gym. You can get to the point where you really enjoy your training. You're not having to give up on leisure time because it effectively becomes something that you really enjoy.
It's like two birds, one stone.
Is it?
Yeah.
People taking up a sport, people playing football, people playing rugby. That's why I think like the powerlifting community in particular comes in really, really handy. Like we've got some great lifters at MSC. Like we've got some people that are competing at a really high level. But we've also got people that enjoy powerlifting who realistically might never want to actually compete. They just enjoy the focus of it and the structure of it because it's enjoyment in their training.
This is one thing
definitely community as well. Go on, sorry, Dave.
This is one thing I think about quite a lot. So it was a couple of years ago, and I went through a stage where I used to think that you've got to get the training done and then try and enjoy the rest of the day because you don't want to spend your life training. And then it kind of flipped, and I was thinking, well, actually, one of the things I really enjoy doing is training. So why have I got to make that less of a priority to then go out and actually enjoy my life? And a big part of my life is actually enjoying the training. So for a big aspect for me, from a social perspective, is meeting up with everyone and training in the gym. Why do I have to make that less of a priority? Like, why do I have to train at an awkward time? If I want to train it in the middle of the day and the weekend, why not? I really enjoy it. Obviously, not every single time, but if I enjoy training, why does it have to be less of a priority? Another thing I do, so Sonia said about like I train at like awkward times, but I book those times out every single week, and I don't let if anyone asks me for a PT session that time, I just say I'm not available. I don't say I'm training, I'm just not available. Because that's my set time to train. And if I don't have train sessions are quite long. If I don't have that set time, it's going to be really hard to get a 2.5 hour session in. So I booked that session out and I have done for like 5 years. So if anyone asks me for a session on a Monday night at like 8 p.m, I wouldn't do it. I would do it any other time, but not those nights. So I think like everyone says about choosing priorities, if you really want to train and you need to make the decision that you are going to train at this time. And if someone wants to have sessions with you or someone wants to do something else, you will pick another time in the week. And I think Max is really good at that as well. Like, I think it's really easy when you start training, when you start being a coach, that you think, I've got to get everyone in as best as I can. I'll bend over backwards. I'll come in at fucking midnight. And you don't have to. Max is great. And he says, I'm here 4 till 8. If you want a session, you'll come in between 4 and 8. These are the hours because I've got a master's to do. I've got my own stuff to do as well. And people come in. And it's surprising how much people all of a sudden are a little bit more flexible as soon as you give them slightly less of a window to work in. But I think we've all been guilty of trying to give everyone every single time. And then as soon as you start to condense it down, all of a sudden people become a bit more flexible themselves.
Fantastic.
I like that. Talk about blocking out your day. So like this 2 hours I'm doing this 2 hours I'm doing this. I'm going to eat for an hour and then or 2, and then blocking out. It's good.
Fantastic. Yeah. So moving on to the next question then, and this is from Marco Kloss on Instagram. What do you think are Big Marco? What do you think are the most common misconceptions about programming / training? So Max, do you want to jump in on this one?
It depends who you're talking to, but for general population and general health, like just people that want to be in better shape and live longer, and just generally be fit. People make this big assumption that like training is a huge investment of time, and that if you want to get into, if you want to lose a bit of weight or you want to become healthier, you've got to train like Luke was saying, like 2.5 hour sessions, like 4 or 5 sessions a week. Like I know not every session is 2.5 hours a week, but you know what I mean.
Sure, yeah.
People assume that it's an everyday investment of 2 hours plus, and it's just not the case. Like, especially if you're a complete beginner, like 2 1-hour sessions a week can get you a long way. If you can do 3 sessions a week, great. If you can do 4 sessions a week, great, even better. But I think all of us here on this call have probably had clients who are brand new to training and have done fantastically well coming in twice a week. And that's the biggest thing where I think the amount of time it actually takes, the amount of time you actually have to commit. There's still there's definitely still a dose response. So like if you can train more, you'll probably do better, granted. But yeah, for those results for the first year of your training, it's really not a massive investment. It's actually embarrassingly easy at times if you're just really consistent with it.
Yeah, it goes back to what we've talked about on previous podcasts, Max, with consistency. Finding a program that's enjoyable, finding a way of training that's enjoyable, and therefore sustainable, and then we can build the consistency from there and get the results, like you say, whether it's a couple of times a week or or whatever. Really, that's much better than going in smashing 4 weeks as hard as you can and then not training again. You see people struggling down the canal looking like they're about to die. You're thinking, hang on a minute, pal, you're not going to walk for 5 days after this. So yeah.
But then also from a programming perspective, like I've been thinking about this quite a lot recently in terms of just the use of intensity as well. Like I think for most people, if you're not going to be a powerlifter, if you're not going to be a weightlifter, if you're not going to play competitive sports or whatnot, it's very rare that people actually need to lift heavy. Like it's not to say you don't need to work hard. I mean, but for a lot of people, the kind of adaptations that they want, and especially when you're new to training, like you don't need to lift anything heavier than like a 6 rep max or an 8 rep max. Like you can still work hard doing sets of 8 and sets of 12. You can still push close to failure if you want.
Well, the less trained you are, the easier it is to create a stimulus, isn't it? So
exactly. Like the risk reward is just not there as well. Like if you're new to training, there's just no reason to go and do 1 rep max and 3 rep maxes unless you're testing.
Even if you are super advanced, like there's loads of research coming out now about like relative like reps and not having to go within like a 6 to 7 RPE. So you should be training pretty much exclusively between like 5 to maybe 7 or 8 RPE, the majority of your training. And then you look at beginners that are like absolutely grinding out reps that have been training for like three months, and you're like, dude, what are you doing, man? Like,
I think that could stem from though, like that's all they see potentially online is
the highlight reel.
They don't see the 95% of the other training. We're just doing the the boring, well not boring, but the meat and potatoes. I think go on, Mark, sorry.
I was just saying, it can be, it's a bit boring to watch online. Someone doing, 3 sets of 5 at 5 RPE, isn't it? So I guess it's not rock and roll, and that's not what people see online.
I think one thing is potentially, ever heard the phrase paralysis by analysis? So like you're just trying to think of trying to do everything the best possible way, like, and then you end up doing nothing, or you end up just jumping from modality to modality. And you end up, not making any progress because you think you're potentially thinking too much about your training, if that makes sense.
For sure. Can relate to that from a business point of view as well.
The point I was going to make that's kind of relative to that, mine was that thinking that if someone wants to go in, it's like, I want to get strong, I want to get fast, not being able to do anything else because it's going to interfere with my gains. And that kind of links back into what you've said. So if someone wants to get strong, they'll do zero cardio. They'll try not to do anything on the weekends that could be remotely taxing. And actually, the reality is that like the interference effect just doesn't exist to the extent that people say. Obviously, if you're going to go marathon training alongside your strength training, it's going to have an interference. But doing a walk on the weekend or doing a little bit of sport at like a low level is not going to interfere with your training. And you see like the guys that are the best in the world at stuff, they all have a life as well. They all like doing other stuff. They don't just want to sweat the small stuff like you just said, Ben. And analysing everything and making sure everything's 100%, when actually in reality it doesn't have to be. Like you can do other stuff as well.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, I think we'll round that question up there and move on to the next one. So this is from one of my PT clients, Rowan May, who asks, which sport do you think has the hardest training regime? And Rowan's a pole vaulter, so I'm going to say that pole vaulting is not the answer, Rowan, but it's in fairness, those guys train very hard. A lot of track work, a lot of gym work, a lot of gymnastic stuff. It's pretty crazy. What do you guys think? That's a really interesting question. Nothing for me personally. I did have a sneaky look at these questions yesterday. Nothing actually popped into my mind, and I thought it would, but it could be a bit tricky. Ben, what do you think?
I think when I first saw this, the first thing that popped into my mind was like an ultra marathoner, just spending hours on your own, grinding out miles, just in your own head, I think that could potentially be like really, really tough.
That's perfect for you, isn't it? You love that.
I was going to say that's your weekends.
Nah, but
Let me run in the garden for the day. Boo.
That's the first thing that jumped into my head. But I think, you know, when people think of like some sports that are like, let's say a 100-meter sprint, that's over in what, 10, 15 seconds. People don't see, you know, the hours and hours of other work that goes into those 10, 15 seconds. So it's very hard to, you know, measure what you basing hard as. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what's going to happen now is I'm going to say powerlifting. Mark's going to say rugby. Sonia's going to say weightlifting, and Ben said ultra marathon running.
No bias at all.
I could tell you're an ultra endurance athlete, Ben, when you're talking about 15 seconds for the 100. I mean,
Being generous.
The first two sports I thought about, I think that anything where it requires you to train more than one quality. So like if it's just about maximal speed, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's fairly simple. I think it becomes a lot more complicated and a lot harder when you have to train multiple qualities. So I think like training for rugby, especially like in season or a sport like to that respect, is hard. The one I actually thought about was CrossFit. Is probably like at the top level is probably the hardest one to train for, because you have to have a ridiculous engine and the actual strength levels are good, man. So I think like training for both of those is super difficult. Well, but training for one quality is fairly simple. When you're having to balance multiple qualities,
you got all this like the tactical element as well, like in a team sport.
Tactics, gymnastics. You have to be, you have to be a high level engine. You have to have good weightlifting. I think CrossFit.
It's hard to argue against that. Yeah, that did pop into my head yesterday, and I didn't want to necessarily go with it, but yeah, at the top we're talking about.
You want to give them the credit.
Yeah, you know, but if we're talking about the top competitive level, I mean, Jesus Christ, like it. I mean, it's like the aerobic demand. Like people don't think about CrossFit being aerobic. It's so aerobic, it's ridiculous. But then to still be able to snatch good weight, to be able to do the gymnastics work, to be able to swim, to be able to fight a bear. You know, whatever comes into the WOD, you know, or the open is like pretty, like, it's impressive. It's impressive. Mid like sort of sprint to mid distance track events came into my head, like 400 hurdles. I think like as an event, like it's so lactate, like it's just hot, and even times guys are clocking for 800 these days is like. It's not even aerobic, like it's just pure, like maximal, like lactate threshold work. And I just think that would be a solid sport to train for. Like they got, you know, I mean, me and Ro were actually talking about it yesterday, like, you know, and does a lot of work on the track, and he's doing, you know, seeing the group up there, they're doing the hills in the morning, and they're doing, you know, track work. They've got to be, you know, quick over short distances. They've got to have the lactate, you know, threshold work. They've got to have the aerobic capacity to manage the total amount of volume they're doing. They've got the technical aspect of the stride length and the hurdles and stuff. So like 400 hurdles for me, like, is a bit of a left field choice, but one that I would consider putting in the mix.
I'd have to go almost down the same kind of rationale as Luke's talking about CrossFit training, because there's so many different qualities involved. But mixed martial arts, MMA, like you've got the same thing in that, like it's really, really wide range in physical qualities. But then you've also got something like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is probably one of, if not the most technical sport you can possibly do. And then the actual like physical threat of actually getting punched and kicked in the head as well.
Do you do a bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu DMX?
I've done a little bit, right?
Dabbles.
The smallest amount possible. But again, it's the different fitness qualities, the different physical qualities of CrossFit.
Yeah.
With more of a technical component than any sport I can think of, and you've got like more in the way of like not necessarily the actual competition that can really, really break you and damage you, but actually like the technical training in all elements is very, very physically draining, damaging, and the injury risk is huge. So just in all elements, it's just turbocharged. It's 10 out of 10.
Yeah. You got your skills, to not only have you got your gym work and whatnot, you've got, your skill work, and it's not one sport you're training for essentially, is it? It's a load of other different sports.
Yeah. For normal people, you can take 15 years to become a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and some people will never get to that level. Whereas if you then get to the highest level, you've got guys that are professional standard boxers, guys that are ex-Olympic wrestlers, guys that are black belt in jiu-jitsu, and it's like doing any one of these in isolation would be an incredible achievement. I mean, you're combining a lot. It's brutal.
What you're forgetting though, Max, is that in the 2021 CrossFit Games, there's actually a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu event. So yeah, trumps it.
There we go. Bring them together.
Yeah.
The perfect sport.
What about Sonia? What are you saying?
I really like that Luke pulled out that bit about like how like multi-elemental it is. But I think in fairness that anything you do as a full-time athlete, like on the elite level, is really high demanding. Like no matter what it is, but like the minute you switch your lifestyle to being it as a full-time job and you have to train those hours a week, I think that's demanding enough. Like you sacrifice all time for it, the recovery, the nutrition.
Yeah.
So I think like in terms of that's demanding. But I probably agree with Luke and Matt, like mixed martial arts, because obviously, or like boxing, like come on, you get beaten and you beat other people. So I think that's quite tough. But well, I don't know if I would consider CrossFit as one of those, but probably because you gotta have all the elements. I would definitely not say golf, probably, or pole vaulting. Sorry, no.
Well, I'll tell you what, golf might be one of the hardest skill-wise for sure.
Yeah, but like let's say if you.
But I think Rowan's
Yeah.
referring more to physically demanding. But.
Like if you think of like powerlifting or weightlifting, like it's a lot of heavy weights, same like strongman. Like that's super heavy. Like it must be demanding and tough. But then mixed martial arts are tough in a bit different way. So it's really hard to say. But I would I don't know. I would still say it could be weightlifting. A full-time weightlifter has to take a lot on, like in terms of lifting weights on weekly basis.
For sure.
I'll build on what Sonia said there, and saying like any time you go to the elite level of performance, or you go full time, any sport, like elite performance means by definition you're going to be very fit, but also by definition it's just not healthy. Elite performance on any level, it's not healthy. It's not what the human body is meant to do. It's not mentally how people are meant to behave.
Yeah. It's a tough one to answer. I'll be a rugby nose as well. Luke mentioned it, but just to throw that in the mix at the top level, like if you look at like the aerobic side of things and the testing, like some of the scores these guys knock out in your Broncos and like stuff, they are especially like back row players who are like 110, 115 kegs, perhaps at the top level, an absolute. Forget the strength and power element for a second, like just the aerobic capacity of these guys, like the speed off the mark, the power, the grappling / wrestling type strength and the tackle and the ruck and the maul and stuff. And in terms of multi elements, there's probably not too many sports like it. I always get asked the question like rugby or American football, and it's like, well, American football's so specific. Like you can make a whole career of millions of pounds out of never touching the ball and being but at the same time, if you're asking for the best vertical jump or the best bench press or the best, power clean or the best 40-yard dash or whatever, it's always going to be an American footballer. Like, is it like your running back's always going to have a better, your top running back's always going to have a better vertical jump than your top winger in rugby, maybe Johnny May aside, but your linebacker is going to be that bit stronger, a bit more powerful than your back rower in rugby. But the back rower of rugby can get around the park for 80 minutes, whereas the average play in the NFL is 4 seconds. So like NFL is a fascinating sport from an S&C point of view, because you can just go all in on like a very micro like element, and focus on like not one skill, but you know what I mean, like one skill and a couple of physiological elements. Whereas something like rugby, something like CrossFit, something like MMA requires a broader spectrum. So it's really hard to I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here and going into more who are the better athletes, which isn't really what Rowan was asking, but I just think that's worth mentioning, that it's so hard to say, well, is an American footballer a better athlete than, you know, a rugby player, or, you know, whatever. It's really hard to answer.
Depends how you measure it, isn't it?
Exactly, and as is, you know, as is the question there. So I don't know if we've come up with one answer there. We've got CrossFit, we've got MMA. You know, I'm going to sort of back my decision of like mid-distance like events and lactate-based events, like rowing as well could be in there. Like
I was gonna throw rowing in the
oh
mix.
Jesus, like absolute nauseous out in the water at 4 or 5 in the morning, like doing a strength set, like absolute aerobic monsters, and big and strong as well.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's completely 100% necessary, but like in rowing, I know just the normal practice and the accepted practice is like 10, 12 plus sessions a week. Whether it's completely necessary, I just don't know. Like I haven't rowed a huge amount of rows on the time, but yeah, just the normal practice is double days.
It's like swimming as well. Like that's tough. You know, like talk about early morning sessions and stuff, and just being in water as well. It takes its toll. So yeah.
Open water swimming, that could be in there as well.
Open water endurance swimming.
See how wrinkly your fingers must get.
Oh, can you imagine? Oh, pruny.
We could go on all day. We could go on all day with this, but I think we'll sort of wrap that up there. But that's a fascinating question, and one that I just think you can never answer.
Sports as hard as you can make it, as hard as you want to make it. That's what it is.
Wow. What, you know, we'll leave it there. I think that's a perfect way to round that question up. We've got a question from one of our members, Yasmin, on her Instagram, Beach Body Bready. Great question. This high intensity versus steady state cardio. Benefits / differences, is one better? I could pick any of you for this. Max Harmon.
It depends.
The ultimate.
Well, I've been thinking about this recently. So like, if you're looking at sporting performance, like there's definitely certain ways you want to train, like low and slow, like blue zone, green zone, like really easy aerobic capacity, because it's the most trainable. It's the most trainable energy system, and it's got the least cost associated with it. So if you want to have big, heavy like rugby training sessions, if you want to have big, heavy strength and power sessions, on your off days, trying to do like hard intervals is going to ruin the rest of the week for you. Whereas like doing 45 minutes of really easy, steady state aerobic capacity work, it develops a fitness quality very, very effectively that is very important. And there's no real massive fatigue associated with it for the rest of the week or the following day. So you can get your high sessions in around that. You can focus on whether you're powerlifting, whether you're a rugby player, whether you're sprinting, etc. So that's the big utility of low level aerobic work. Where I think intervals come in again, like if you're looking at sports performance, if you're a field sports athlete, a lot of the year interval training is very different to how people think it should be. Like it's actually much shorter intervals of much more rest. So instead of doing like 30 on, 30 off, and 45 on, 45 off, 10 seconds on and a minute and a half off is probably more appropriate for something like rugby, where it's not about bursts for 45 seconds. It's about who can be the most powerful and the most explosive at the most important and crucial times in the game. So it's 10-second burst, but who's the most explosive over the course of 10 seconds, and who can repeat that over an hour. But then this is something I've been thinking about recently. There's probably, if you want to just lose body fat, if you do 20 reps of 10 seconds at a time, you're just not doing anywhere near enough work to burn an appreciable amount of calories. So if you're talking about body composition, then steady state is probably good, but at the same time, it takes up a hell of a long time. Whereas something like the, I don't know, 4 minutes on, 2 minutes off intervals, where you can work very hard, but you can still go for quite a long period of time, or like 45 seconds on and 30 seconds off, so it's like negative rest. You can work very hard, burn a large amount of calories in a shortish space of time. You can maintain that for as long as you want. You could do an hour-long session doing that if needs be, and you can probably back that up day after day. So if you're looking for a big calorie swing, big calorie expenditure, moderate to long intervals like that, whereas if you're looking at sports performance, steady state and really short intervals.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like, yeah, your steady state work is what I always call sort of, it's cheap. It doesn't cost a lot. We were speaking earlier about, competing at a high level, but still being able to go out for walks at the weekend, still being able to do things outside, and and your steady state work is cheap. It doesn't cost a lot to recover. It's not damaging neurally, so it's a really easy thing to slot in. Like I say, if you're sticking at your blue and your green zones, and if the people who aren't aware, like we were talking about, sort of low, moderate heart rates basically for extended periods of time, and it's a good way of building an aerobic base without the cost of getting absolutely battered from it. And yeah, in terms of high intensity, I like the point about you can vary high intensity, can't you? I mean, we can talk about like 10 seconds on and a minute off, or a minute and a half off being very high intensity. If you look at field sports, it's very aerobic and alactate, base. Is not, that middle ground of like maximal lactate work is actually, it's not non-existent, certainly, because I can speak from experience. There's certainly times where you are entering those energy systems, but mainly that's what you're looking at. But yeah, like benefits to both. Luke, I don't know if you want to, as a conditioning expert with your powerlifting, if you want to jump in.
Well, I did that bike, didn't I, recently?
You did that bike.
I had to test this all bike to see it was fixed. Yeah. I think so. Where Max is coming from a perspective of, if you've got high days, don't add other high days onto them, because something has to give way. If you had no high days though, then I would probably lean towards doing like some higher intensity intervals. If that was exclusively what you were doing, then potentially adding your high days from the intervals would probably be a good idea, because then you might also get the benefits of like additional speed training, additional power training. So if you were doing nothing else and you exclusively just wanted to do the conditioning session, and you thought, should I just come in and do aerobic work, or should I do high intensity? The answer will probably still be both. But I think like you want to keep your high days high and your low days low, is what Max was saying, which is great. If you have no high days, then you can make your intervals your high days, and then you can do like your alactate work. You could potentially do some like anaerobic work in there if you enjoy doing it. So I think if you don't have a high day, then potentially adding some intervals in there, you could get a bit of a benefit from doing some more power work compared to just doing your steady cardio. If you are a powerlifter or a weightlifter and your day's already high, similar to training for like rugby, then you want to keep your conditioning fairly low stress. So then aerobic would be the answer.
Fantastic. Anything else to add? Okay, let's simplify this for a second. Actually, let's simplify this for the average person. And I mean, context is everything, and like this might be difficult to answer, but you've got someone who's beginner to intermediate, and they want to lose a bit of weight, for example. Are you recommending more of your sort of your hit sessions, your Metcon type stuff, or your aerobic work?
I think you got to. I was adding like into this that like you said that it doesn't cost much, like in terms of the neural amount. I think that it's time consuming. Like I think if you have certain level of strength, I think you might benefit a bit more if you don't have the time, or if you don't want to give the time for more intense sessions, because you can keep them shorter and you can get a lot of work done in terms of the calories. If that's, for example, but like if you like and enjoy training and you want to spend in the gym hour or hour and a half, or 4 hours a week, do it, but I think that depends if you actually enjoy it or not. And I think that some like people from general pop don't enjoy exercise that much, so maybe they would prefer to have it done a bit faster and spend as little time as possible. So I think that you need certain level of strength and fitness to be able to hit the high intensity session the way it should be to get the outcome. Because you might think you work hard if it's HIIT session, but maybe not. You know, like we all know that like if you say work hard for 15 seconds, you should give your best and have the sufficient time to recover. But if you have a beginner and give him a high intensity session and he's gonna do like not much for cold during those 15 seconds, he's not gonna get the same as let's say Ben would do if he works at the same time, if that makes sense. Like I just wanted to say the point about time that like doing aerobic work may be a bit more time consuming.
For sure. And again, it's finding what you enjoy as well comes into it.
And it's what you're going to do, what you're going to do consistently as well and stick to.
Yeah, exactly. So for me personally, I much prefer a bit more of a high intensity session than a long sort of steady state. I'm going to stick on this question for one more point actually. Where do PTs and celebrity PTs and stuff, where do they go wrong with when they're talking about high? One of my biggest bugbears is like people saying, "Oh, we're doing this HIIT workout," and it's actually not HIIT. It's like as steady state as you could possibly be. Is that it?
It's exactly that. It's doing steady state but breaking it into intervals. But actually, you could probably sustain that effort for a whole 30 minutes. You could do the fucking step up, step down, or whatever it is, for 30 minutes. But you break it up into intervals, and all of a sudden you think that's a fantastic modality, and it's different, but it sells. So I think it's just the intensity that they're bringing, what they're trying to sell doesn't match what they're actually trying to do.
Sounds sexy. We're doing a HIIT workout, and we're jumping around.
It's like the insanity.
It's actually just pure aerobic work.
And the insanity ones where it said intervals, and it's instead of doing short periods of high intensity and long rest, we flipped it on its head, and now it's long periods of high intensity and short amounts of rest. It's like that's just aerobic training, man. Like, but people are like, fuck, why have I not been doing this? Why haven't I been doing it for long? Seconds? Yeah.
20 seconds. Yeah. That was a nightmare. I found like running any sort of like a high intensity stuff after that.
That goes back
to insanity and be like, oh, yeah, but I'm gonna work for longer. It's like you're kind of missing the point here.
It's a complete misunderstanding of the words intensity and difficulty.
Sure.
You can make something feel very difficult. If you say, right, work as hard as you can for 15 minutes, it might get difficult, but by virtue of you're going 15 minutes, it's not intense. You're nowhere near my outputs.
Yes,
and people think, oh my God, this is really hard. It must be really good, or it must be really intense. You're nowhere near high end.
Yeah, for sure. Just rounding up the high intensity versus steady state, because we discussed a lot of different things, but we probably didn't nip it in the bud. So does someone want to jump in there and just kind of finalize and conclude that question?
I would say it's entirely context and goal dependent. I think for most people, we can probably all agree that some level of like low end aerobic work is just very good for health and performance. But then depending on your performance goals or your time constraints, you then want either something that's actually genuinely high output, hard intervals, or longer intervals where you're looking at burning more calories. So always keep your aerobic work in there no matter what your goals, and then dependent on whether it's performance or body composition focused, you adjust your volume and adjust your intervals on top of that as needed.
Say no more. Hopefully that's answered your question, Yasmin. Cool. So moving on, last couple of questions. This is from Big Lee from MSC, one of our awesome members. What are your thoughts on adapting your training around lockdown best practices? We spoke about this quite a bit, but over various podcasts. But Ben, how have you sort of found?
I think
how you've adapted your training? Maybe
sort of like take inventory, take stock of what equipment you've got, and just think, right, okay, for the next, let's say from now until we reopen, for the next 6 weeks, what can I do with the equipment and things that I've got, and not get annoyed at the fact that I can't do potentially what I want to do. And also you might have to readjust your goals. So let's say, you were really enjoying your powerlifting, and you think, the whole goal was to lift more and more weight, potentially, or with better form. Just readjust your goals and readjust. Readjust what you got access to, and try not to get frustrated by it. And setting smaller goals or adjusting goals.
Yeah. What about you, Luke?
We spoke on a couple of podcasts about actually trying to optimize your training, make progress is quite difficult. But in terms of maintaining your training is a lot easier. We talked about cutting the volume down to an eighth or a third, and actually being an okay way to maintain what you've done. So we spoke about being realistic. If your goal is maximal strength, it's not the time that you're going to be building strength, no matter how good your modalities are at home. We're trying to just maintain what you can do. And in terms of maintaining your muscle tissue, just shifting your focus from trying to optimize things to just trying to maintain them, and being realistic with your outcomes from it. So I still try to aim to get as much volume, but the realistic amount of optimal volume, or what's going to have an effect on what you're trying to build towards is going to be a lot less than it has been in a gym. So I just think being realistic with your outcomes, that you're trying to maintain what you've done in the gym versus trying to make progress in terms of a strength level. And then also maybe shifting your focus to other aspects of fitness, and maybe using it as a time to build up your aerobic pace. Use it as a good chance to try and make yourself as injury-free and resilient to future training programs as you can. So I think shifting the focus to what you can do, and then just trying to maintain what's important to you as best as you can with what you've got.
Yeah, for sure. If you're if you're a beginner and you're seeing this as an opportunity to get into some training, then you probably can get some strength benefits from using very minimal equipment. But as you say, Luke, for a more advanced athlete, that's just not a band or a body weight work just isn't necessarily going to progress you. But as we've said, and we've gone through various different bits of research to show that actually you can maintain a good level of strength with some fairly minimal to moderate stimulus. But as you say, shifting the focus, I like that, because that's I think there'll be a lot of powerlifters out there, a lot of weightlifters, a lot of rugby players that could have used this opportunity to say, right, okay, well, I'm already pretty strong, I'm well skilled in what I do, but I'm probably not aerobically as good as I could be. My work capacity is not great. My body composition, my body fat, I can get out and walk a lot more. I can do some steady state aerobic. I can do some high intensity, stuff outside. I can get my nutrition spot on, et cetera, et cetera. So I think life's going to throw these curveballs at you. Nobody saw this one coming, but sometimes, like Ben said, you got to just pause for a second, just analyze the situation, and be able to adapt. So moving on to the last question, is the independent use of bands sufficient enough to trigger adaptations for strength? So this kind of rolls on a little bit from what we've just been saying. Lee also goes on to say, context. Since lockdown became a regular thing, the sale of bands and specific programming has skyrocketed. Accommodating resistance is a common term when adding bands to loads, but is there an increase to strength with bands alone? I'll open this up to the floor as it's the last question. Anyone can jump in on this one.
So from a strength perspective, we know that you need the intensity to drive the adaptation. So you need to be working above, let's say, 70% to build strength of your max. With a band, you're not going to be able to do that. So from a strength perspective, a resistance band is going to offer very little for strength gain. from a muscle building perspective, we know that low load versus high load training, as long as you're kind of equating for like repetitions that are fairly hard, you can actually build as much muscle with low load as high load. With resistance bands, then you can probably maintain or actually even build muscle mass. But the training you would have to do would be incredibly, it would be tough. Like having to take a set to, like, let's say you're doing press ups with a band around your back, you're having to do to get effective repetitions. So let's say get within that like 4 RPE plus mark. So within 6 to 5 repetitions from failure. Doing bodyweight press ups for a lot of people are going to have to do a lot of reps to actually then get effective reps that are going to build muscle. So from a band perspective, you can match the amount of work that you've done with a barbell. You can get effective repetitions, and I think you can build or at least maintain your muscle mass. But from a strength perspective, you've just not got the intensity there that's needed to build or maintain strength. So I think if your aim through lockdown was to maintain your strength, because stuff like positional isometrics, where you're trying to maximally pull against the towel or push a wall for your bench press, etc., will probably be better for your strength because you're getting the absolute intensity up. But you haven't got the intensity for the bands to maintain your strength, but you can get your effective reps in, which will be good for hypertrophy.
So perhaps putting into low days, doing your banded work for time and attention on your sort of, you know, a lot alongside some steady state aerobic. On your higher days, you might go out and do a bit of high intensity conditioning and do your isometric work. That might work quite well.
Exactly. The thing with the bands is that if you want to like it is super uncomfortable to take like everything. Oh, low training is fantastic, but let's say like you want to build your quads, but you've got an injury. So you're doing like low load stuff that you can tolerate a little bit more. Doing like, I don't know, like a squat at 40% of your max or 30% for like 30, 40 reps is super uncomfortable, man. Like it's really, really difficult. I'd much prefer to do just normal sets, like traditional, like let's say 15 reps max. Well, I'm a powerlifter, obviously, I would say that. But like from a hypertrophy perspective, to get those effective repetitions, you have to take things closer to failure, and it becomes super uncomfortable, especially if you've only got a light band. So like doing like a one-arm roll with a band versus a seated roll or a one-arm roll with a dumbbell, you might have to do like 30, 40 reps to get that close to failure to actually have the stimulus. So I think that's one thing that people miss the mark of. They get the bands to try and swap out what they've been doing with a barbell, and they try and match the reps. They say, oh, let's do a set of 12 with the bands, and actually none of them are effective for what they're trying to get to.
You need to start hitting your 20s, 30s, 40s, you know, to
get close to failure,
to make up for the load, for the lack of load. I think in terms of sales, it's you know, it makes sense. It makes sense. You know, we're in this period where we can't use gyms and we've got to train from home, and like selling bands and buying bands does make sense. You know, not everybody's got the room or the budget or, you know, whatever to buy a squat rack, to buy a barbell, to buy a load of plates, you know, and I think you can buy a band. I don't know how much bands are, but like a $5 for a band or a $10 for a band, like is actually like it actually makes a lot of sense in the period that we've had. So I think in terms of sales, that's why you've seen the sales of them going up. And you know, I mean, there does seem to be a lot of different people selling them, and I don't know how many variations of bands you can get, but fair play to them. You know, got to make some cash. But I think in terms of buying bands, like it's completely made sense during this period to do that. You know, I think if you were low budget and limited on equipment, like, you know, you're looking at body weight, you're looking at bands, and you know, if you have got a bit of cash, you know, I always say, you know, lockdown or not, you know, kettlebell is a wonderful tool. I think that you can get a lot of use out, and especially it's very versatile, and also minimal floor space required. Obviously,
it comes down to like taking stock of what you've got and, like you say, what you can afford. And you know, you don't want to fork out hundreds of pounds for like a cross trainer or something when you know you're not going to use that. If you can spend, like what you say, a tenner on a band, doesn't take any time to set up or get out, it's just there, you know you're going to use it consistently, then crack on.
Then happy day. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's, you know, in a period where it's like you can't be overly fussy. It's just like you know, anything that can provide a bit of a stimulus like that is probably you know, if you bought a band for £10, you know, 12 months ago, you've probably, you know, safe to say you've probably got your money's worth there. So watch out for MSC bands coming out soon. that'd be a hell of an advert, wouldn't it? With us doing
some clamshells,
few clamshells and booty skills.
We should release them in 7 weeks when gyms reopen.
Get them ready to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can do hit workouts with bands. Fantastic. I mean, that rounds off our questions, guys, for today. Thank you very much for sending those in. We'll be looking at doing plenty more of these. I like them because rather than us coming up with a topic to talk about, which obviously we can do, it's really great to hear what you guys want to hear from us and want us to answer. And it's really cool that we can sort of do that through the podcast. So really hope you've all enjoyed it. And thank you to the team for jumping in and giving some great insight there. So yeah, we'll round up there, guys. Thank you very much for listening. MSC will be reopening, all things being well, unless Boris throws a curveball. We'll be opening on the 12th of April, so watch out for latest news and the build up towards that. It's going to be really, really exciting. In the meantime, we'll plug away at our podcasts and our blogs. They can all be found through our social media channels and our website as well, mscperformance.co.uk/blog. If you click through there, you can find all our blogs, our podcasts on Spotify, as well as YouTube. So thanks very much for tuning in, guys, and we will catch you next time. Cheers.
Thanks, Mark.